All right, looks like we're live. All right, guys, let's see who's out here. Oh, look, Daniel Stocks, Penny Lau. What's going on, Penny? Welcome back, guys. It's been a while since I did this stuff. Cyber podcast, man. I've been really busy, so definitely on me. But guys, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Today we have the usual suspect, Crispy. Yeah, I'm gonna call you Crispy from now on.
It's fine.
Crispy Cream, aka Kris Patel. And we have Sean from Invest to Live. This guy has got an awesome channel, man. It's like there's so many guys out here that just have super underrated channels. Like Sachin's definitely one of them. Kris, you're one of them. Like Sean, bro, like the stuff that I remember like watching a few of your YouTube videos. I'm like, man, you carry the content you have, like the messages you have, like so well. Like straight up speaking, not even because we're live or anything. I'm just totally telling you.
I appreciate it.
So if you guys have not actually gone to check out like Sean's stuff, please go check it out. His Twitter is right. I put it at the bottom over here. It's the Invest to Live. But his YouTube channel is just as good. I would say it's if anything, it's a lot better. He really
hey Shabar, can you change the view to like the horizontal one so this way, because sometimes it looks weird on.
Are you hating on my banners, man? Is that what's
not your banners? Just on the thing, because I'm like trying not to move out of frame, but it's like
no, okay, no, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Hold on. I just fucked it up. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Yeah, let me edit that real quick. But yeah, Sean. So I'll let you just kick it off, bro. Like, you want to just talk about what you did and whatever you want to talk about. And then we'll go on to your usual suspects. I know the crowd favorite guys. I know it's like Palantir. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But I also want to touch on things like decentralization and, more specific to Bitcoin and Web3 and just crypto in general. So CodeStrap was supposed to be here, but he had another obligation to go to. So we'll kick that off at another time. But when he gets back, we'll really touch on decentralization. Sean, maybe if you're free at that time, we'll have you on at that time as well.
Sure.
But really, I wanted to touch on decentralization and why that really matters. But for now, we'll do Web3, Palantir, and all the usual stuff as per usual. So Sean, man, I'll let you kick it off while I fix the stupid banner.
Yeah, cool. Listen, I'm glad we all got the memo to wear the same color shirt. We nailed that. I mean, absolutely crushed it. So, like, that's already going. We're off to a good start.
You totally
I mean, look, I'm really glad to be here, guys. I appreciate connecting with you and getting a chance to be on here. I would say that after years and years, probably about 20 years of working, as an investor, an entrepreneur in the analytics and data science space, I find that my passion is only growing more every day with what I'm seeing in the markets, the way the markets are moving, the way these companies are being developed. Just a quick background. My full-time job, I work in data science, analytics, and delivery to sort of all the companies you guys have heard of on the Fortune 500, 1,000, et cetera. When they're thinking about how to go to market around data, how to build analytics into their structures, that's what I do. I go and visit with senior executives. We talk through strategy, digitization, how to embed intelligent experiences within their platforms, and really just better operationalize in and around data. So I think that where I'm coming from here is both from the theoretical side, I understand this at a very deep, complex level, but then from a practical perspective, I understand the challenges that it takes to actually implement it in an organization, right? We oftentimes will joke that the modern executive thinks they can take a map, staple it to the dashboard of their car, and they've got GPS. And we're like, no, guys, sorry, that's not what this means, right? We want that. We want to know where we're going, how to get there, what obstacles are going to hit us on the way, and how to have a better outcome. So I think that's really my background here in a nutshell. That's on the AI and analytics piece.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, too, I would throw out, I've been investing in real estate for a very long time. I run a real estate fund on the side with a partner.
Real estate, nice.
So we do that. And then I've been in the market since the late 90s. As a long-term investor across a number of platforms, from equities to currencies to whatever, options, everything. I could go on all day, but I won't do that to you. But I have a funny kickoff here, guys, because I've never been on a show with you, so I thought I'd hit you with something that not a lot of people are aware of. And I know we're going to get into Web3 and decentralization. We're going to get into crypto. We're going to get into Palantir, whatever you want to talk about. I'm up
John,
for
by
anything.
the way, man, before I let you do that, just want to let you know that this is a totally safe space. It's only us three and like 40 other people. I'm kidding. Just do what you got to say, dude. It's all good.
No, all good. So I was going to just kick this off with a question, and I'll let you guys do your thing here.
Yeah.
In the 80s, who was the biggest private satellite network? What company had the largest private satellite network in the 80s? Any idea?
Intelsat, I think, or Viasat.
Yeah.
Not the makers of. What company was embracing satellite in the 80s?
Couldn't tell you.
Yeah, you wouldn't know, right?
No.
So Walmart was the largest private network of satellites in the 80s. And this is one of the main reasons, why they're so big today, because they recognized, everyone else thought satellites were useless. They were not needed. It was an immature technology. Walmart at the time being run by Sam Walton, right? I'll talk about that in a second. Good question from Deem here. The reason why I always bring the story up with satellites is when the entire market is telling you this doesn't make sense, this technology is not ready, the ones who typically will embrace those forward-looking opportunities are the ones who explode and go far beyond their competitors later. And I think what was satellites in the 80s, what was web in the late 90s and early 2000s, I think is data science and analytics now where we are today. And I think that the challenge we have as investors, as entrepreneurs, as content creators, as anything you want to call it, is we keep talking about this idea of embracing data, but we're not talking about the operationalization of any of it. So I always share that story about Walmart because no one ever knows. Like, yeah, the biggest satellite user in the world was Walmart in the 80s. Who would have known? But that ability to translate real-time voice communication, transactional data has allowed them to know trends from one side of the country to the other in an instant when their competitors couldn't even figure out how to send a marketing document out to their customers down the street. So anyways, I'll take a pause there. I love talking about this stuff. So,
in the spirit of storytelling, I'll tell you guys a story about how I pretty much got started in my journey and like why data science interests me so much. And same thing with other technologies. So my background, once again, is in radiology. One of the things I was a radiology manager. And in 2013, I had a very interesting conundrum come my way. My organization at the time was hemorrhaging money and they had a mandate. So one of the things that they did, we're a union shop, organization has a lot of unions. So one of the things that, we have to do is we have to leverage our resources to better, to do our job. So the challenge that was presented was the organization has decided that we are going to do something called a hiring freeze. So if anyone ever been in a hiring freeze, it is the stupidest thing in the world because what it does is you're pretty much locked in with the staff that you have. And what they're doing is waiting on staff to leave based on something called attrition. So as you get older, you retire, people leave, right? But they won't backfill a position until they get to a point where they feel like, hey, we have a good amount of staff. Well, my department in radiology at a hospital, we ended up getting the worst of it because 2 people actually left the job naturally and 1 person was fired for reasons I won't go into. But now we're down 3 techs. And at the time I'm a manager and I'm like, okay, well, you know what? I need to hire more people. And they said, absolutely not. We're not going to do that. So I said, okay, well, what are the other options? So my director at the time said, Kris, I need you to figure this out for me. So I said, okay, sure. So, me being a tech in the previous life, I was like, okay, you know what? I have an idea. Let's move around people's schedules a little bit so that during the busier times, right, we can have staff there. And then there are other times where we're not as busy. So we'll move people's schedules around. So instead of having everyone show up at 8 to 4, and then some people show up 4 to 12 and then 12 to 8, let's stagger the staff so that this way we have staff during the busier time. Well, guess what? We're a union shop. Once again, the union said, absolutely not unless we understand what the value of your move is. So now how do I prove to these people what I'm going to be able to do, or why they should allow me to make this radical change outside of the original contract that they had with my guys, with my staff. So at the time I was like, well, how am I going to do this? And the only way I could prove it was having data, right? Well, guess what? All the data existed, but it was siloed. Our EMR system was this old system. It just sucked. I couldn't get anything off of it. The other thing is we use a PAC system, which means in radiology, we store our images. That was great. We had all the data of how many cases we did, but it was nothing that you could put on a spreadsheet and analyze and actually make a decision. It was just every patient that we did, all the exams, all the modalities that we use. So then I said, okay, what's the other approach that I can use to get this data? So I did what any young manager does. I said, all right, well, I sat at the front desk for a couple of days and I just tracked how many patients were coming in and out between 8 o'clock and like 9 o'clock, right? And I know that sounds stupid, but hey, I was desperate. So I wrote down, okay, we had 3 patients at 12 o'clock. We had 5 patients at 1 o'clock. We had 10 patients. But that was stupid. After 2 days, I was like, there's got to be a better way. So
dude,
I
you're like
stopped.
a bouncer at a club.
Yeah. So I stopped. And then I said, okay, well, I need to go to finance. I need to ask them like, hey guys, can you help me out here? How many patients are we doing per day? I mean, you surely have to have that answer because if you don't have the answer, we got bigger problems than staffing issues. And that's when it was like the finance people were like, well, we only get this data like 2 months after everything is done. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, it's not accurate data. It's not going to help you. I said, okay. So they pointed me towards someone who worked in business development. I went into her office, and let me tell you, it was the cleanest office in the world. Okay. Like literally you walk in the door, she had everything organized. The pens were in the exact spaces that, like you would have. But let me tell you something about that person. Probably the most useless person in the entire organization. And that's the other test that I came up with as a young manager. The first thing I would do is go into your office and ask you for a stapler. If you could give me a stapler in less than 30 seconds, you were probably a person that I don't need to talk to because you're useless. Any real person who does real work does not use staplers. They use paper clips, right? Dude, that is the Kris Patel standard. Like I actually asked that in interviews right now. Like, so I have a question. I assign you to a project. Are you going to staple everything or are you going to use paper clips? The person that says paper clips, there you go.
Because you know what it sound like? Kris, you know what you sound like right now? You sound like the Wolf of Wall Street of like fucking radiology.
Yeah, dude, I'm telling you.
You're the Wolf of radiology, bro.
Dude, if you have enough time to sit there and staple stuff, that means that, you know what? You got way too much time on your hands. People who are actually doing work know the value of putting it on a paper clip, because then if there's more work to be done, they're not going to go unstaple shit. They're going to be efficient. They're going to just put the I think we lost Sean for a second.
Yeah, he dropped. I'm sure he'll come back.
Yeah. Oh, wait, man. So I'm telling you, the staple test works, right? Every person I've ever worked with that used paper clips, they were like probably the most useful people, and the ones that used a stapler.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone in the chat, if you're using staplers, I'm sorry. I'm not going down on you. I'm just saying, for some reason, I've always found
half of this crowd, man. I'm a staple guy myself. I don't like you anymore.
All right, whatever. I don't care. Right? You're useless, Sean. You're my paperclip guy. You're useful, all right? So I went to her and I asked, okay, so can I get this data? And she said, yeah, I can get you that data, but it's going to be a few days. I said, okay. So 2 days go by, and she's like, well, the data is so much. I'm going to give you you're going to have to give me a month. I said, all right, that's fine. Take a month. By that time, I'm struggling. I'm doing all the overtime myself at this point. So I'm staying late and coming in early. It was horrible. At the end of the month, I go back to her and I said, hey, can you help me out with the data? And she's like, well, here it is. I got it ready for you. And I was like, okay, where is it? And she had literally printed everything. She would not give me the Excel file. I don't know why, but she would not give me the Excel file. And then I was like, look, you got to help me out. Can you please do me a favor? I had to go to my director. I begged her. Finally, she gave me the Excel file, and it was all unstructured shit, like literally just garbage everywhere.
Okay.
Now I had to figure out, okay, first I had to clean everything up on Excel, get everything organized, everything properly put into columns. And luckily for me, I was in college. I learned how to use Excel really well in genetics and statistics. So I was able to kind of create my own filters and create everything that I needed, and use actually some VBA and some macros to actually make it very seamless, so that you didn't have to every time you wanted something new. But the problem that I ran into is I still have to go to her every goddamn month to get this data. And she was being super difficult about it. Well, that's when someone in the organization said, Kris, I got this. Just don't go to her anymore. Go to our IT folk. And I said, okay. Went to our IT folk, and I was like, yeah, I'm trying to get this data. And this lady's telling me a month later to come back. And they're like, dude, do you have access to the data warehouse? And I'm like, what the hell is a data warehouse? I said, they're like, that's what she's getting all the data from, the data warehouse. I said, you want access? I said, what do I need? He's like, just have your director call me. I'll give you access to the data warehouse tomorrow, and you could take it from there. It's like, okay, sure. They gave me access. I literally used the same spreadsheet. All I had to do now was just run the query for a month, drop it into the spreadsheet. Boom. I knew exactly what was going on. Guess what? I ran a query for 12 months, printed it out the same day, went upstairs to my HR department. I said, schedule a meeting with the union folk right now. They scheduled a meeting, and I was able to show them, hey, this is why I need to stagger people's schedules. This is why, because it's going to make us more efficient. So I ended up using this as a use case. And guess what? We never had to really hire more people, because people realized the value in staggering your employees to when their demand was. I know that sounds like such a small and trivial thing, but when you calculate the amount of money my organization saved by not having to hire 3 people for the next 10 years, that reaches into the millions of dollars. All right. And that's what operationalizing data is.
Right.
You know, eventually I worked with another company that came to me and, you know, they saw everything that I made in my spreadsheet. They said, look, can you send us this spreadsheet? Guess what they did? They created the same thing in Tableau and linked it to our data warehouse and then linked it to our database. Now it's actually like, I think the turnaround on it is less than a day, where, you know, it just refreshes every day. So my entire organization right now goes to Tableau and just literally they call it BI. They sold them the software for it, but it was all based on a lot of the work that I had done fundamentally. And now it's amazing.
BI, man. It's technically BI. Like the data is really raw, right? That's what people don't get for the most part.
And what's amazing now is that my organization was able to replicate the entire thing across our network. And so the other thing is we ended up developing a lot of other use cases on top of it. So we had patient turnaround times now. We had not only when patients were coming, but what kind of exams were coming in more frequently. We could go historically, run that against our accuracy on our readings. So now it's become a part of our fundamental nature and actually helps us bring that insight and operationalize that data. Now, here's the thing. Organizations need to take a grasp of what I just said at the really, really small level, get their hands on products like Foundry. But guess what? They can't keep it at the top level. You have to also give it to the people in the middle and the decision makers in the middle and also a little bit higher up, because that's where the most use is going to come from. And I think that's the beauty of Palantir Foundry, is that tools like what I just described, they can be built very easily and they can be literally made into like this beautiful, aesthetically pleasing thing. And it's almost near real-time information and data, so that this way, when you make a decision, you're not trying to struggle and going to a department and getting all this shit. You can literally create this yourself, you know. And and so that's why my journey right now and my goal right now is to get more familiarized with coding and a little bit of data science, because I know that my industry needs products like this that can be operationalized and then sold and cha-ching, 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 you know. So right now, that's my goal is to understand. And when I ran into Foundry and I looked through all the data and the use cases where I'm like, dude, we haven't even scratched the surface of use cases yet. And it's going to become the next big thing. So I give it 10 years from now, everyone's going to be asking why we didn't have this 10 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even just your industry, right? Like the stuff that Sean was talking about before too. It's pretty much everywhere. And the ironic part of all this, and I don't know how many there's, like, that's, you know, before, big shout out to like my, you know, the folks that join my calls and stuff. Like a lot of these guys are all like data folks and developers and stuff like that too. So I know a lot of it resonates with them, but I know there's a few data folks in here, and it's true. Like a lot of and they work in different industries and stuff too, right? But the funniest part is people don't understand this, and a lot of Palantir like investors, especially those who aren't sort of in the space of data or IT, and Sean, you could probably attest to this too, right? But they don't understand that this stuff is not, it didn't just like fucking come about in the past like 2-3 years, right? This has been around for decades. The thing is, every company on every product, even different, like all the way back from like the old DB2s, if you want to go back to that level, all the way to like whatever PaaS service you have now in terms of databases, all the way from like the old virtual machines and data centers, all the way to now, which is in cloud. Everything has been collecting data from, you know, like God knows whenever it was plugged in. So it's not like this is new. It's just that now it's become a real problem, because I don't know which company, and Sean, you could probably talk about this too, because like I don't know which company kicked the hornet's nest, but there was some company, I'm sure, way back probably in the 80s or 90s or some time ago, where oh, you don't get that, kid, sorry, no, I was reading a comment, but yeah, some time ago, where like they probably looked at this data and they're able to create some app or something around it, and we all know this, right? There's stuff like this that exists. It's not data science specifically, but there's like you know, a lot of the development stuff is based around like TDD and all this stuff that's based around forward looking based on data, or forward looking based on like previous tests and stuff. This is not a new concept. The problem is there's so much of it now. There's so much of raw data being stored that it's come to a point where it's about to spill over, where people actually don't understand what the hell to do with it. That's more of the problem. And I think there's been a few companies that have come out and said, like Tableau's one of them that did a really good job of visualizing a lot of the stuff, right? Because a lot of this is really, really not sexy at all. But when they really took this and sort of like blew it up a little bit, they were like, holy crap, I can take all the events that have happened in my entire ecosystem and actually predict stuff. Or and by this prediction, it's not obviously accurate, but they put a weighting on it, right? So like by looking at certain things, you're able to predict based on, okay, this and this happened before, and it caused this one problem, so most likely we're able to solve it later using the same sort of metric. So a lot of that, like these kind of analytics is really important. And this isn't just BI, it stretches across like different kind of verticals within the IT scope as well.
I mean, like, guys, look, like this is just a stat that I keep in my head. 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are produced every day. And like, I had to write this down so I wouldn't get it wrong. That's a 2.5 followed by 18 zeros.
That's keep that in your head, Sean.
So I think you can break this down really into two things, right? Is we need to start getting more contextual around the way we deploy and operationalize data. But to your point, it's great that we have historic data. We have built it. By the way, I sold DB2 years ago and MDM and also mainframes. So like when you said DB2, I was like, oh my God, the nightmares. But the problem is we've been driving, businesses have been driving, executives have been driving their car with the windshield covered in paint. And they're only driving through their rearview mirror. And they're saying, well, this is what happened. Let's just keep on going. Hope I don't hit anything in the road. And what many of us have realized over the past decade and a half or so is, well, that's not good enough. Like we need to start to be able to project and forecast ahead, right? Like I'll get into this later when I do due diligence, it is not like most people do it on an investment or a company. Like I'm applying probabilistic models, propensity for numbers to pop up. I'm looking at ranges with forecasting, but that's another thing. For the moment, with the biggest conversation we're having with customers at scale is how do we drive more of a forward-looking propensity model based on attribute level contextualization? And that's like if I was to boil down my specialty, what separates me from my peers, it's really attribute-based forward-looking assessment of numbers. And I love the comment that was made earlier about this idea to like create a number, right? Like I need to understand, how do I increase sales of Foundry, right? Well, first I have to understand, what are my customers who buy it? What are my customers who don't buy it, right? 0 if you don't buy, 100 if you do buy. When I look out across the TAM of all of my possible customers that exist, I can then look at the attributes of my winners and losers and start to weigh those out in that scale. I'm sure you guys know all this. But once I understand where on that spectrum a customer sits, now the signals and indicators of why they live there, I can become more prescriptive around, here's the knobs and levers I can pull and twist to push them more towards a buying customer, make them look more like a good customer. Right. That's where the persona piece comes in so much, you know?
No, that's fair. That's totally fair. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I feel like this entire space is just really budding. It's almost at that, it's past that primordial soup sort of phase where I think we've seen this stuff in the past 20 years, like Sean, the stuff exactly what you're mentioning formed that primordial soup, right? Yep. There's a lot of applications where I think, and you coming from the sales side, you probably know this too, where there's a lot of like things that were being sold that were part of the thing that you were selling. It's just that it was serial. It was more, it was used for a very sort of singular purpose, but now it's all interconnected and you're able to sort of like plug it in. And it's like people knew about it back then, but then you didn't have that kind of mindset at that time because things worked.
Well, the problem too is like the people, a perfect example. Are you guys familiar with SPSS? Really old technology?
Yeah.
Okay. No, so SPSS was statistical practices for the social sciences. It's a really simple license. You use it to run things like regression analysis, linear text analysis, etc. Yeah. This has been around forever. It's cheap money. It's very similar to Tableau in a sense. You become an SPSS expert. You start to produce statistical analysis for a company you work for. And it was sort of just like, hey, here's some numbers on a spreadsheet that some executive wants to see. It's meaningless. Then SPSS, I worked with SPSS, by the way. That's why I know it. This then moved into what they called SPSS Modeler. This was getting a predictive engine to start to look at different types of data and derive based on the statistics, what's our trend forward look like. And you guys are right. Like where we are today is we just keep iterating and building. But it all starts with asking the question of what are you trying to solve for across any department, industry, sector, et cetera. And I think that's the big thing is like, we've been limited by our ability to ask questions of data when there's so much data and sitting in so many siloed use cases, right? Like I just talked to someone the other day about the thing is, it's like silos are the opportunity for those who can solve for them, right? Yeah, like look at like OCR data, the ability to visualize, a sheet of paper with words on it, can bring that into a data analysis. Like we're going in the direction of like autonomous data analysis, right? And I think companies that we all follow here are trying to get there really fast too,
That's true.
So
that's true.
One of the things I do want to say, and the reason why I think this is actually becoming more ubiquitous around. This is the first generation historically, especially at the executive level, that's coming up that has 100% experience with computers. Okay. 2010, when you go back to 2010 and you spoke about this kind of stuff, you still had people that were like, yeah, I don't know about this email thing. Now, if you don't know how to email, you're done. Right. So every executive that I know right now personally, they are all about being at that high level of understanding with technology and understanding that what the value is. So that learning gap of technology is starting to diminish really quickly. By 2030, the entire generation of people are people that have become so savvy with computers that when you give them a new product, they'll be able to pick things up. And by 2040, in my opinion, at least at a low code level, people will be able to understand things. So I think what a lot of people are asking is, well, how come, and this is the question that Palantir gets a lot, is how come Foundry wasn't adopted 10 years ago, especially if they were a 17-year-old company? Well, guess what? The prerequisites were not there. And it's the same thing with IBM Watson. IBM Watson is a freaking amazing product, especially for healthcare. But you know what their biggest challenge was? Their challenge was these doctors that still liked writing on pen and paper. They were still old. They're like, yeah, I don't know about this. I don't trust this computer thing. It's not going to. So now it's come to a point where people are actually like asking the right questions, and they're also able to like be able to use the data, right? And our generation is the first generation where we actually not only want to see the data, but we want to be able to play around with it. We want to be able to develop some use case around it. And I think that's why Palantir is going to do really well over the next 10 years, because this is the time. This is the time where a lot of executives are technologically savvy, and there's also additional pressure from societal changes that, hey, we need to do more with less. The days of unlimited resources, they're gone and they're not coming back. Guess what? If you cannot live in that environment, you're not going to be an executive for very long.
It's true. Well, and on top of that, the Foundry couldn't have been onboarded 10 years ago because it didn't exist. It's like a 7-year-old product. But sorry, Sean, go ahead.
I think the point about executives, though, and there's a lot of comments in here about folks who are in school, working on degrees, et cetera, going to school soon. You know, if your intention is to eventually move into management, executive leadership, et cetera, and you don't have an understanding of how to leverage and ask data questions and know what and where it comes from, you're doing yourself a disservice. I'm not saying to deviate from getting, a management degree. What I'm saying is get a minor in technology of some sort. You have to know this. You will not be hired if you can't speak to the technology, period, full stop, et cetera. And to the point you made a moment ago, one of the biggest challenges we have, actually, this is like just a total rant for a second. The problem is there's a lot of positions that exist in corporate America today that are filled with completely wrong people. So take the CTO role as an example, a chief technology officer. That role needs to go to someone who is your point, by the way, about like these are executives who have grown up with computers. My first cell phone had a green screen. I wrote my work for school on a typewriter and then a word processor that was yellow and black, right?
What?
Like, I mean, computers weren't, I'm a little bit older maybe than I look, but I've watched this. I remember going to high school and there was a computer that we could share to look at and figure out how it would work. And there was a disk that was floppy. Okay. So like
Oregon Trail.
I swear to God, Oregon Trail is what I was going to get to, but I thought no one would even know. And the reality is like, we have a lot of CTOs who have that background and haven't embraced this. And we talk to these chief technology officers who are supposed to be the drivers of next generation tech. Like this is why there's still a CIO. They're dealing with today's problems, the databases, the warehouses, the data. We need a technology officer. We need this whole that job title to change into people who have a vision of what's coming, what it looks like, how to shift on technology and learn it fast. And I think that that's going to be a big opportunity as well for folks who are chasing both that business and technology background. Is that we need people who can understand the math of money, but also the math of data to lead these companies. And that's the opportunity for everyone in this chat who's asking these questions. That's your opportunity. When you know the finance and you know the tech, you're the person winning that opportunity.
Dude, you're looking for like a canary in a coal mine. Okay. So you guys touched on a few things that I think is pretty important. Like, the education bit and all this stuff, right? I'm telling you right now, I've been to 3 different schools for three different things, but all surrounding around technology. And the one common theme of all of them was the teachers. No offense to any of you teachers out there, especially for the technology stuff. And again, you're here because we're all honest here, right? But absolute dog shit, guys. Seriously. And I went to Okay, so I'm Canadian. So I went to University of Toronto, which is like a fucking top 10 school, right? Like the teachers, some of them are really good. They're, and you're gonna get a good mix, right? But they don't get it. They're teaching you stuff from their 20 years ago experience or whatever the case is, right? So the problem is you learn good fundamentals. Don't get me wrong. Some of the schools are very good for fundamentals and all that stuff, right? But past the fundamentals, like how is programming logic going to help you understand the data model or ETL processes and all this other stuff? It's not going to help you. It's going to help you write code, but you're not going to understand the business process and all these other things. You need more practical people. Now, more recently, I did like a college diploma, and in that program, they actually brought in industry experts, and they did a sort of like because like community colleges are always known to be like vocational schools or whatever, right? So I thought it was great. They brought in community people. One of them was a data guy. He worked actually, funny enough, at IBM onboarding some of this stuff. And he sort of walked us through how the business process works and what the true value of what he does, which isn't just moving things from one table to another, which is what we would have thought as students, right?
Yeah. Right.
So I think their education side of it is really important because the kids nowadays are all like being taught to learn Python and like shut up and just go and write code, right? But it's not the same. Like eventually, software developers will be a little bit augmented to some degree because there's a lot of things already that you don't need to do anymore, right? I remember when I started, you had to write like every single line of code, like all of the functional modules you had to write from scratch. Now you just get it from an NPM package, or you just get it from some sort of library, right? So,
Dude,
yeah, good point.
It's so true. And just a quick piece on that to interrupt you. The need for people to do coding. I'm going to hurt a lot of feelings here. I'm telling you,
man.
Every day,
rip it off.
It's not going to be needed. I mean, there's so much has already been built from a baseline perspective that once we have autonomous notification of how to read code and understand code, the need for that is going to be very transactional, very consultancy based, and there's not going to be as many jobs as there were once. Exactly, like same thing goes for accounting. Like being an accountant is the equivalent to being a coder, right? Like you're in the numbers, you're in there every day, heads down with that pencil writing. The thing is, though, now it's automated and it's easier to be automated. It's more forward looking, Anyways, I'll pause there. I just had to call that out. Like I still think it's a great career, but it's going to be tougher and tougher.
There is one thing that I know that holds data science and actually operationalizing data back. And that's something that I'm glad you just hit on, Sean. Some executives, they don't want to know the truth. That's the truth.
Oh yeah.
When I came up with what I created and I showed everyone, there were some underperforming hospitals who had a lot of staff and they had very little cases.
Yeah.
That made them look like dog shit. I really did. And you know what? This is the data, they didn't like it. They said that this product was garbage. Well, guess what? It wasn't garbage. It's your organization. Luckily for me, I had an executive leader who looked at it, believed in it, and said, you know what? This is not a product that's wrong. The product, the results are wrong. The results that you guys are getting are wrong. So you need to change the way you're doing business. So that is the other thing that people are scared of too, is that how much of this data will reveal my own fallouts. And I know certain CEOs that have been tenured for the last 10 years, they don't want to transform digitally. It's like, this is a headache. This is a chance that I'm taking. If this fails, I'm going to be even a worse position because then they'll have reason to fire me. Right now, it is my business to keep all my laundry hidden. You ever gone into someone's house? You're like, wow, it's really clean, but you look under the bed and all the shit stuffed under there. Well, there's a ton of companies in corporate America that have a shit ton of stuff stuffed under their beds right now. And so some companies, I know that we want them to operationalize data and be more efficient, but guess what? They purposefully are not ready for that. Guess when they'll be ready? Right when they're about to hit the bankruptcy and they're like, we need to change ourselves to be more efficient.
That's the number one issue I run into in almost every conversation that's not going well is I hear this, guys, 3 times a day. We have data problems. Okay, what's your problem? Well, the data is being entered incorrectly. It's like, so you have habitual offenders of entering bad data. Well, it's not just that. It's we don't have connected systems the right way. It's like, what are you doing to fix that? And they're like, well, that's next year's project. And it's like, cool. So here's the deal. And like, I have a reputation in my industry of being sort of like a big, a challenger of executives. And I've done really well because of it, because I don't bring bullshit. I bring truth to my conversations. Is like, this is not a linear conversation of like, first I'll fix the data, which by the way, will never be fixed ever, because how do you identify the anomalies in the bad data than people who continuously make bad data? Well, you can't, because you're not analyzing the data to look for anomalies that change every single day. And this has been a huge, huge problem for companies, is that they still view this as just another little business problem, while their competitors, the startups, I mean, they live in data. I watched this I went through YC's startup school cohort a couple years back, and it was really great because we had some amazing speakers who came in. They were talking about the North Star.
That's Y Combinator, right? That's Y
Correct,
Combinator.
Y Combinator, yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm going to forget the guy's name, but he was talking about how when they were starting up Facebook, their North Star was this particular tracking, right? And everything was about doing everything to be better on that. It didn't drive revenue necessarily. It didn't drive the company to be bigger or be worth more, but that's what they determined based on the data and understanding of their business. But to your point, it is really tough when you're in hospitals are great examples, or medical, large medical firms, because like their challenge is like, cool, we need to have master data management to make sure all of our records are aligned. That's tough. We have EMR systems to manage those medical records. We also have data warehouses for our transactional, for our insurance, for our costs, etc. And it's like, yeah, the problem is they're all important. One isn't more important than the other, and one can't be on a time frame. The problem is it's really hard to get capital and revenue to do these projects from a board that doesn't understand the value of data too. It's not just the person running it, it's the people who hold the purse strings.
Yeah.
And I think that is the question of like, cool, you nailed it too. Right when they're about to go bankrupt, they're like, well, shit, we got some good data in here. I wish someone had brought this to our attention. And the reality is they don't. I'll say one more thing, because I thought you had a great point there. When you're talking a lot of people, I've heard this a lot, especially within Palantir and similar type companies, they say, well, why aren't more people embracing this? It's like, well, here's the deal. Thinking about a mid-sized, non-publicly traded company, that owner might have a big decision to make. Do I buy Palantir to better understand my data, or do I buy a brand new Porsche this week? And I'm not saying that to be funny. These are true conversations I have, where you have to remember that a company with 200, 300, 400 people is still a pretty small company. Mm-hmm. And if you're on 50% margins and you're doing pretty well, and your family's owned this manufacturing firm for 200 years, maybe I buy a new Porsche and take a vacation to the Caribbean instead of buying some new software. And that's the truth that people who aren't in my side of it don't see. This isn't based on logic or whether or not Palantir is good. I get like tons of negative comments that say the same thing. Well, if Palantir was so good, more people would buy it. It's like, listen, that is not the way the real world works. If logic and needs were truly assessed, then capital would go out the window. We'd spend anything to make our companies bigger, better, more efficient, more operationalized. But the reality is there are political challenges in companies. There are executives who are building their own empires and fiefdoms that are separate from the big vision. There are people who are trying to build their careers that this will get in the way of them getting what they need to build it. It's just not a perfect world when it comes to the way this stuff gets deployed.
No, that's
and
fair.
I hate these fiefdoms that some people create. Trust me, even when you step into like a board meeting, who's on. You can tell by where people are sitting, which people are aligned with who. Right? I'm telling you, it happens. HRs, and the other thing is HR is aligned with this person. I've had incidents where literally like HR sends people like that are friends of theirs, right? They won't say like, oh, here's just the 5 resumes, but all 5 of them are like personal friends. And this is how organizations die, right? You want to have an organization where people are not creating their own mini kingdoms inside your organization. You want them to think that the whole organization as a whole is going to operate, like a kingdom, So you're absolutely right, Sean. I hate fiefdoms, man. Like if there's one thing that like drives me crazy, it's like every time I walk into a hospital, I really have to find out who the real power players are. That's like the worst part of it, because I just want to deal with one person, but I know that, hey, if I talk to this person, it's going to rub this person the wrong way. Yep. And if I rub this person the wrong way, then this person who I was starting a conversation with won't talk to me again.
No, that plagues culture. That's the stuff that plagues every culture. IT culture is no different. Yep. To be honest, though, I think in the future that we're moving to, this stuff is going to absolutely be stomped out, just because we're moving to sort of like a more empirical truth where there's it's based on data analytics. It's actually based on results, right? It's also based on goals and results. And before we move on to like the Palantir stuff right away, just to touch on a few things, the stuff that you guys are talking about with the whole silos, there's a reason for that. Like there's a reason why these people struggle and want to do this stuff, because all these teams are naturally already based in silos. Like when you get hired in a department, rather than looking at it sort of a horizontal way where it's like you're contributing to this a larger pool of data, whatever the case is, right? People look at it as, oh, your job is this. And trust me, like I'm a consultant for larger companies, and this is like, I'm telling you, like, I mean, whoever, you know, if you employ me, don't fire me, okay? But like, all I'm saying is when you get hired, we're literally told to shut up. They know that we can help, but then we get hired, and they're like, listen, whatever this manager wants, you give it to him, and don't do anything more than that. It's literally like most of these consulting companies are designed to come in and just keep the lights on at the very best and charge you up the ass to get that money. Really, that's really all that's really made for. So I'm attesting to the stuff that you guys are talking about. I work with silos all the time, and what I try to do is I tell the developers, like the lower end guys, I'm like, okay, guys, so if you really want to make it better, try to do this, this, and that, because they don't have enough pull to actually make it work. But there might be that one guy who has that pull, and he can make a difference, and he gets a promotion, and we get rehired. So it's possible, but it goes against all current business and IT sort of like just the business operations of things, which sucks. It terribly sucks, but it just is what it is, and that's unfortunately the world we're trying to stomp out with all of this, this empirical way we're moving towards. All right, so let me ask you this: we're like kind of well into it, but Sean, dude, like, how the heck did you find Palantir, man? Like, what is your story behind this stock? I know that you talked about it a few times, but let us know how you found it.
Yeah, sure. So, as sort of we talk, I talk about this on Amit's show as well. Like, I've been in and around the space for a long time, but my life is not total encompassing of software and data science. I do a lot of very small venture capital, seed round stuff. I'm in those communities up in the area that I live. Obviously, I went to YC, so you guys can assume I know a lot about startups there. So I was big on this idea of data because this is like the late 90s, very early 2000s. I was working in a company that's now out of business completely because of data, by the way. And they would run batch reports overnight. And in the morning, you would cross your fingers. There'd be 500 sheets of paper in the printer, and you'd hope it had everything on it. But the problem was within 1 hour into the day, that transactional data was completely useless for the people for the day, to the point that was earlier explained on this call. That was my first touch of understanding, well, what is this called? What am I doing? What is this? And then I was like, okay, well, this is reporting from a data warehouse, a transactional data warehouse. And then I started getting interested in, what if we could get this more real time? Yada, yada. I was still a young guy. I started really reading into, the future of data. Where were we going from a reporting standards perspective? The idea of analytics and data science was not something I was looking at. And it led me into really getting really, really interested into, I'm a finance guy by nature. So it got me really interested in the idea of where the vertex of finance met high tech, really understanding, like, how do we get a better picture of the future tied to these things with technology that can tell me how to get there. I'll give you the really short story of it, but like, I've worked in the space for quite some time. I knew Peter Thiel as a big investor. I knew of a lot of up and coming government contract competitors who I wasn't necessarily competing with, but I was aware of them. So Palantir was one that was just on my radar really early, not for necessarily a good or a bad reason. At the time, and a lot of people don't realize this, most of the articles about Palantir back then were very negative, extremely negative, actually. Not because of their technology, but more so from the standpoint of the government work, the data privacy. A lot of people, because you have to remember, like, in 2022, things are different than they were in 2006, right? In 2006, it was this very scary feeling of like, are you in my house? Are you watching me? Are you reading my emails? Because that was still a new thing. So I was sitting on a plane coming back from an institutional research conference, or Association of Institutional Research conference. I had, funny enough, spoken about Tableau and SPSS at that conference. And a buddy of mine, Phil, I don't know if he'll watch this or not. I'm going to send it to him. I hope he does. He also works in a similar space. We're on a plane. He walks back. He's got a Bloomberg magazine. For those who weren't around back then, that was a real thing, sheets of paper. Drops on my desk, and the cover is Palantir. And he's like, read this on the way home. I read it and was like so blown away by what they were doing, how they were doing it, the way they were working within contracts and expanding. That was like the fuse that lit. We ended up talking for hours about it. I started really getting heavy into the research. And at the time, it's easier now, but back then you could still get a hold of private shares of companies. It was just tougher to find them. I went crazy trying to find a way to buy some Palantir stock, and I couldn't get it. It was so sold out. No one was willing to sell it, etc. So this got me looking at Alex Karp, the way he thinks, the way that they were investing. And I know it's very easy to look at this sort of from a third party view and say, like, well, it's a very political company. It's a this company. It's a defense company. Cool. Everyone can have any opinion they want of anything. I'm looking at data and financials, right? I'm an agnostic investor. That's where it really set up for me to be interested in this company. And the first thing I did was I literally went to their website to see if they were hiring, because I was curious if they were growing, what sectors they were looking into. They were obviously very heavy in the defense space, the space I don't really work in. And since then, I've been tracking them wildly, and it's been one of those ones on my radar. There's a bunch of private. We all know the E-Trades, the Robinhoods, et cetera. There's a whole nother world that exists for private investments in stocks. I was talking to my broker over there, and we've had this thing on my radar for years, right up until the DPO, frankly. And I've just been excited about it ever since, but not for some childish, silly reason of like, oh, it's a cool company with a cool founder, but like their 20-ish years of experience in working, building with real-time defense-based, government-based data, massive volumes of data, the ability to connect and pull insights of that data. That is really intriguing if you're in this business to understand that they've had 20 years of getting good, letting the models learn, understanding what the needs were, where they were falling down. That's where my interest really started here, was just that big, broad picture of what they were building and the way they were operationalizing for warfighters, right, on the ground in real time, when most people were still trying to figure out how to visualize an Excel sheet. Right, it's just that they weren't a big name because a lot of people don't follow that space. So that's really where I got started there. But to be fair, this whole move into commercial space, we can talk about that whenever you guys want. But like, I think it's super interesting, and I also think it's super misunderstood by most people who are looking at this as like a YOLO speculative stock. I think we got to like step back from that a little bit and get more realistic about it. You know.
Let's get into it, man. Commercial space. That was my next. That was my next card anyway.
Cool. Yeah, so it's funny, right? Like, I think what I want to do is step back a little bit and think about it like this. When I approach due diligence on a company, and look, I am long on Palantir. I think it's a great business model. I think they've got great leadership, but it's not without its challenges. I think a lot of people are sitting on a lot of stock that are really, really tough right now. I think they're way down also, a lot of folks. So I can speak to some strategies on that because I know that's some of the questions I got on Twitter prior to this call. But here's the reality of it. The ability to connect all these disparate siloed data sources, we just spent the last almost 50 minutes, by the way, talking about across data warehouses, data lakes, Excel sheets, the ability to pull all of that up into cohesive understanding of your business, and then to start to run operations on top of it, and then distribute that information out in a way to the teams who need it in different ways. That's really the power of Palantir. And I know what people say all the time. They say things like, well, that's not a moat. Everybody can do that. Or, well, what about these other companies? And I hear this thing all the time about like, well, Google could crush them or Microsoft could crush them, et cetera. The thing is, we oftentimes as investors, especially retail investors who are newer to this world, due diligence is not like looking at a Yahoo page for 5 minutes and checking short interest or seeing where the stock's been in the past day and a half, right? Yeah. When I think about due diligence, I'm talking about understanding the way RFPs are written and why they've won them for 20 years. I'm trying to understand when I join IR calls, if I can ask questions, I'm calling to the company on a regular basis and asking questions. Right, so like anyone who is an investor and putting real money behind these investments, like you have to start to do your own research. You have to know the numbers behind it. I've got kind of a funny parallel I was thinking about. When I do a video of myself breaking down Palantir's earnings, I get 3x the views than when I do a video of understanding net revenue retention and customer acquisition costs. And what I think a lot of folks miss is all of my research is on that CAC and NRR that then just goes into why I understand the earnings in a way that some folks don't. So I think that's where I'm at on Palantir, is like, this is a really interesting company that's doing really interesting things, making it easy to deploy, work with, and execute on data, delivering in a number of different ways to different teams across different use cases. But I want to talk to some of the things that also I think are going to be really big challenges for them, because that was a question I got as well, was like, hey, when you're going to talk to these guys today, what are some of the problems with Palantir? Because all we keep hearing about is like YOLO speculation, 10x returns. Like, yeah, I want those too. I want asymmetric returns as well. But if I really think to myself what they're trying to do by moving into commercial, there's some key challenges there that maybe aren't recognized by people who aren't in the industry. And I'll touch on them quickly because I don't want to just be me talking the whole time. But when I look at what they're trying to do right now, you go to their website, check the careers page, and they're hiring like crazy. Yeah. They're trying to hire salespeople all over the world across different divisions, sizes of companies. I've read their requirements. I understand what they're looking for. The biggest problem in this entire industry is trying to find salespeople who have a technical acumen and background. Myself is probably a good example of like more tech, but then has that sales piece as well. Yeah. Trying to hire these positions in a really tight labor market is going to be tough. Then when you hire those folks, getting them trained up, skilling them up, and also making sure that they're aware of how to properly position us against competitors, that's a tough challenge. Now, that said, if they do it right, then that's a great advantage. I think that to me is one of the biggest challenges. And the only other challenge I would add as well is there are regulatory concerns for me with any company working in and around data today. I think you guys were going to talk about Web3 today. I don't know if there'll be time, but like that's also a really big area for me as well to think about. The more we get into data and the more we want to understand who owns it, who's governing it, and who's going to have access to it, there can be long-term effects for companies like a Palantir as well. Right. So I'm going to shut up for a second because I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking and where you're at on it.
No, I totally get you. Shabari, I think you're.
Is that me?
Are you mute? Yeah. There you go. Hello? Oh, I don't know why it's echoing. Is it me? Oh, you know what? It is me. Stupid thing.
Damn it, Kris.
Wait.
One time.
It might not be me. It might not be me. Okay, I think it was me. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think exactly what you mentioned with commercial, and that's one of the things I'm actually looking forward to in terms of acceleration for Palantir, because the whole sales model, I think with Karp trying to do all the sales by himself was not the right one to go with. Anytime you have software sales, you need people to physically go on site, talk to people, understand the users, see what the use cases are for all the things they're trying to do, right? And to have one person fly across the world to get that done is not it's not feasible, right? The other thing is their business model also relied on JV partnerships with other companies to say, okay, you know what? Like I'll give you one example of something that failed for them, and it was really a bad look. An example was Credit Suisse. They had a product called Signac. If you guys do a little bit of research, they'll tell you about it. But basically, you know, they created a way to track their traders to see if there was any manipulation going on to make sure they didn't have any rogue traders. Well, the product supposedly was really good, but then some of their partners found that there's not really that many use cases for it. They spent, they were joint partners with them. And so guess what happened? The product ended up failing miserably. At one point, everyone's like, wow, this is a great product. And it failed miserably. Not every product that Palantir has created ends up becoming as successful as Skywise, okay? Especially because there may be some challenges from your partner end that may not operationalize into something that's productive. So how do you get around that? Well, one, you make your product as ubiquitous as possible. So now you're hitting more. It's almost like taking a shot with like a regular gun versus a shotgun. So now you need a shotgun approach where now you're trying to hit as many industries as possible with a modularized product, which they're doing. And now they're sending out their salespeople to get CTOs and to get like organizations to adopt a full thick product is really, really hard. And a lot of companies won't do it. So an example that I always try to give is, imagine you trying to sell an organization Microsoft Office, right? You go to them and say, oh, look, I've got a Microsoft Office license for you. It's got all these different products. I mean, I'm talking about, let's say go back to the 80s when you're trying to sell this product. This company's like, I don't know what the hell OneNote is. I don't know what PowerPoint is. You're telling me it's good, but I don't know. But imagine instead you say, well, I'll sell you this one product. It's super cheap. It's called Microsoft Word. They like the product. They're like, okay, what else do you have? Hey, guess what? There's another thing we have. It's called Excel. You get in with Excel. Hey, there's another product, PowerPoint. Before you know it, they'll buy the entire suite, right? And then eventually it just becomes a natural part of doing business. So I think that right there will help Palantir by modularizing some of the smaller offerings and get them through the door. And then after they're through the door, they're able to upsell the product much more. Go ahead, Sean.
I have a question. Yeah, their net dollar retention is absolutely phenomenal. Yeah. And for those who are not familiar with like net dollar retention or NRR, because I know a lot of folks may not be, what this basically means is that when they do sell a customer their platform, not only are those customers keeping it and paying for it again, they're buying more or using more of the functionality. And Kris, to your point, the reason I get really excited over companies like Palantir is they've actually taken the time to build a foundation of a company that can solve for any kind of problem in this space. But it takes time. That's why it's been 20 years. They had to get their data connectivity and interoperability, right? What that means for those who don't know, is they need to be able to touch any data from anywhere that looks any way, shape, or form. Sometimes we've got dinosaurs, sometimes we've got crayons, sometimes we've got potatoes, right? We got to make them all look alike somehow to make sense of that data and to standardize that data. That's part of it, right? It's a layer. Then we have to be able to take that and push it up to an operational layer to run the models, to build the themes, to answer the questions. Then we have to visualize that data. Once it's visualized, we need to be able to push it out and make it easy to go to the HR department, the sales department, the product department, right? So the excitement here for folks, because it's easy to point to, Kris, I'm so actually happy you brought that up, the product failure, because that's a good thing. Now they know where not to focus time. That's an MVP, right? They can build applications and SKUs off of all of the work being done by the underlying layers of technology. And for the record, I want to call this out too. Almost every major company out there is leveraging multiple vendors to solve for this. People who have Tableau also have Power BI. People who have Palantir will also have other analytics solutions. People don't just have one data warehouse. They're using Snowflake and S3, or they're leveraging Azure for a different processing company. And there's lots of reasons why you do that.
BigQuery,
right?
So many.
Exactly. GBQ, exactly, right? We see this all the time. I work with a customer who uses Tableau to visualize sales. They use Looker to visualize operational metrics. And then they use a third-party analytics tool to perform data discovery on all of this in the back end and bring insights forward. So I sort of hear these things of like, well, they're going to get beat by so-and-so. It's like, they're not, it's additive, right? These are companies that spend tens and hundreds of billions of dollars in IT infrastructure over 10-year periods. It's really important to understand why that is. And the beauty of all of this, by the way, just to speak to due diligence for a second, these RFPs that they're winning are public, right? Federal, government, military, international RFPs for anyone who doesn't know is
request for proposal.
Thank you. Yep. Or sometimes RFQ or RFI, whatever it is. I know you guys know. But like the beauty of this is you can go in and read what was in the RFP. And you can understand like, oh, look at all the things that they're doing and we're able to check off and win that contract on. This gives you the ability to really, really go deep in there.
So Sean, let me just interject for 1 second there. Now, both you guys are super bullish. I am too on Palantir, but I want to present both the objective light as well and I do this a lot on my channels, which is probably why I get some here and there. But the things that you guys are talking about, to be very honest with you, can also be mentioned in the other light. You can also use that exact same thing and talk about why Palantir is where it is right now in terms of valuation and why they're having, like Alex Karp admitted himself that he was struggling. And Sean, like, we know being in this kind of, and Kris too, like we know being in this space, that is a grave error, like especially when you're coming up with products and you're not able to monetize it from an earlier stage. What if Palantir had a data lake 7 years ago? If they had a data lake, you're looking at at least a $60 billion valuation. If they just had a data lake, which, to be honest, I mean, let's be honest, us three can build, right? But again, you need the network effects and stuff like that to sell it, of course. But it's an easy product, nonetheless. But
here's the funny thing: Snowflake. If you look at it, they spend more money on sales and marketing than they do on product development.
That's what I'm saying. So you guys touched on that, right? And actually, Stan, who is a ER nurse, man, thanks for all the stuff you do. But anyway, like you guys mentioned in the comments too, like this is the stuff that I try to discuss in some of my videos, which is it is very tough to hire salespeople that are both, they know what they're talking about technically from a software perspective. Forget software, even just a SaaS and business perspective, and a data perspective, and a sales perspective.
Yep.
And Stan in the comments was saying like hire your competitor salespeople. It's very hard to do that. It's actually very, very tricky to do that because the good ones have really good packages and they work very well with the businesses, and it's very cushy.
Yeah,
it's very cushy. So it's hard for them to leave for a company like Palantir, for example, even if the promise is good. They just don't know, right? You need certain assurances as salespeople. As engineers, you don't need that many assurances because your job is pretty transferable. But what you're moving as a salesperson over is actually you are not the product, right? Your network is the product when you're a salesperson. So when you're moving over, no one gives a shit about you. They care about your network, who you sold to, what connections you have in the industry and that kind of stuff. Stan, data lake is basically a really large store of data, by the way.
So just for anyone else who has that question, Stan, I want to call that out too. I was waiting to jump on that. When we talk about a data warehouse versus a data lake, think about a data warehouse as a supermarket. When you walk in, there's aisles. You know exactly what's in each aisle. Yep. You can figure out where on the shelf it is. I need this type of data. Oh, it's on aisle 4, 14 feet down, third shelf up. Think about a data lake. A data lake is like a scrap yard. There's just raw material everywhere. some of it's junk, some of it's car parts, might be some metal pieces, could be copper and aluminum. A data lake is just a gigantic repository of raw data where we don't exactly know what we're going to do with it just yet, but we're keeping in this place for when we're ready. The beauty of this, man, talk about asking the right question at the right time. That's another reason why having autonomous data understanding, like with Apollo within Palantir, to look at a data lake, make sense of it, standardize, and push that up. Sorry to jump off topic, but like, great question. Because
here's a question that you may be able to answer. What is a data lake house? Because that's the new buzzword that I've been hearing a lot. So it's like a hybrid between a data warehouse and a data lake. But I'm like, okay, well, how do you piece it together?
Okay. Here's the problem. When I said a moment ago that a data lake is raw data in an unused format, think of a pile of stuff. Well, what if we want to start to think about that raw data in a way where we can sort of understand what's there? Maybe we still have piles, but in this pile, I have car parts. In this pile, I've got metals, ferrous and non-ferrous. In this pile, I've got garbage. This is sort of like, I think a hybrid is a good word for it, but maybe it'll be misunderstood for those who don't work in data. It's really thinking about it in terms of like recognizing the fact that we have all of this and we need to start thinking about what and how we're going to interact with it. So preempting some of it by having that, I hate the terminology, don't you guys? Like, it's such like a data lake house. Like, hopefully someday when I retire, I'll live on a data lake house somewhere.
I like a data beach house, but that's nice.
Yeah. That's for salty water.
I'm a data cabin guy. I love data cabins.
I just want a data mansion. But yeah, exactly. It's really just sort of the preemptive steps to get some degree of management in and around a data lake. And I think about probably the reason for this is let's be frank, right? We're generating so much more data, and so much of it is now becoming not only more raw, but more types of disparate data sources that they have to start to get some sort of a structure, or else the data processing gets really too tough on that. That's my take on it. Anyone else is welcome to a different take on it.
No, you're right. Actually, Palantir Phoenix is one thing they did for, I think, through Palantir Cyber, where they actually did. It's using Apache Pig, so it does that whole cluster-based contextualize, and you query through that like horizontal layer. So it's definitely, that's why I'm so pissed. I'm like, man, these guys should have really made this into something that's more like,
I'm glad that I was going to do a video on Palantir Phoenix. Maybe you should do one, man. You should do it.
Man. Go ahead, dude. You do it.
No.
We'll do it together. We'll hold hands and everything.
Yeah, let's do it. We'll do it together. But basically, Palantir Phoenix lets you take all this data, like literally huge amounts of data, and do it at a much, much faster pace than what previously existed.
But this is the kind of shit that pissed me off, and we'll get to this actually in the next topic. Let me just present it here. But this is the kind of stuff that really gets like, oh my god, it gets my blood boiling, right? Because for me, if you have something, and actually before we get to it, just real curious, Sean, you said you did something with the YC, right? Mm-hmm. What year was that, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh boy,
is it 18?
18 or 19?
Dude, you might have seen me there because I was part of that startup school actually.
I bet, you know what? I bet we probably were in one of those. Remember we were doing the cohorts of 4?
Yeah.
Oh, we probably did. Yeah,
I was with the one that was on the eastern side. There was like a group called Graspy. I think those guys made it right to the end. But anyway, that's pretty awesome. Anyway, cool.
That's cool.
So getting to the point, the stuff that really gets my blood boiling is, I just like, sometimes. Okay, so some folks will say that Alex Karp mixes his politics in with business. In my opinion, they don't mix. Now, I'm not saying that he's a bad guy or they should be like, out of there, whatever. Like if Peter Thiel and Alex Karp were not at Palantir, I would not be investing. Let's just put it out there, right? But my thing is, sometimes you can get a little bit ahead of yourself. And I think he did admit to it with the whole, Palantir Cyber and a few other things that they could have done. He admitted to it, and that's cool. But from now on, they're a public company now, right? So the shareholders and stuff. And I'm not one of those people that wants profits now or anything. I don't care about that. But for me, it's like, if you want to hire engineering talent, and I'm just telling you this as a former software developer now, and I'm an infrastructure engineer. If you want to hire good talent, the one thing I would say that people are looking for as talent is not stock options. Like, you can get stock options from anywhere if you're a good engineer. What you're looking for is actually results. So you want to know that the code that you're doing is actually providing some value, right? Now, realistically speaking, whenever we write code, we actually, and this is why I'm talking about competition in the banner, okay, and Alex Karp, but when you're writing code and stuff, you typically know what it's going to do for the most part. You have your sprints, your scoping sessions, you have all of these things that are already planned out, right? So you know what's actually happening with the code you're writing. Imagine you went through a year worth of development, right? And you're putting stuff in and then it never gets put into the market. Like, dude, I would be pissed. I'd be like, are you kidding me? Like, I left Google to come here and Google like monetizes my product and then throws it in the graveyard, but at least they tried, right? Whereas I don't want it to be misconstrued as the company saying, oh, we want to build something in the future, so then we're not going to sell it now. Don't worry about it, kind of thing, right? Dude, that's the one easiest way to lose engineers, actually. I'm just saying, right? So for me, I know they're changing it now, but I get that. I get all that, but I want to present this side of it too, which is because a lot of people talk about why are they offering such high like stock-based compensation? I think this is why. I think they're having some, in the beginning at least, way back, maybe they had some retention issues, and we find the stuff on Reddit. There's guys on Reddit that were like former Palantir engineers, right? Why did you leave, man? You would have had early shares. You would have had such great options. Yeah, you got to think about that stuff, right?
When I mean, look at AWS. AWS just announced they have to like almost double the available salaries because everyone, for those who don't know, if you work at Amazon AWS, even in a really highly salaried position, you're not getting bonuses or commission. Typically, you're getting restricted shares. So like, yeah, you can get really wealthy, but now you got to sit there for 4 years and wait for vesting. So the question is like, do I want to do that or not? I also think that part of what you just explained is exactly why we've seen the rise of like the FIRE movement in finance, the financial independence, retire early, because people are staring at code all day, realizing that there's zero value into it, right? Not really zero value, but they're feeling they're not seeing value, and it's not who they are. It's not who they want to be. They want to see the work they do make changes to be, change things. And I think that that's a great call out as to why we're seeing that. Is like, I don't want to be a cog in the wheel. I want to have the ability to impact what actually goes out the door. And I couldn't agree more. It's both sides of the equation. Talent in general has realized that they're worth more than they ever have been before. And you can be who you are and bring your beliefs to work with you now, where 20 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, you wouldn't have done that, right? You just wouldn't have. Now, if you're smart and you're talented and you have something to offer, you can be all those things and still be yourself. You can still wear what you want.
No, that's true.
This is a totally 10-second story, but like I'm drinking Dunkin' Donuts. I'm up in the Northeast. This is what we drink. And their signs now all over the windows of every store are like, 16. It was $12. Now it's 13, 14. It's 17 now, the one near me. And it's because they literally can't find people. And it's because, people are saying to themselves, I am worth more, and I want to get my worth. Now, however you feel about this, right? Everyone's going to have an opinion, but it has scaled up into technology, into leadership, et cetera, where it's like, I'm okay to make a little bit less at a company I believe in that has my values. And especially, not just to tie a negative into Palantir, to your point, is our ESG investors all of a sudden going to start saying like, you know what? I'm not cool with companies that do defense spending or defense work. I'm not down with that. That's a big risk too. I'm not saying it's there today, but like it certainly could be.
I feel like Palantir is a pretty good ESG play still, though, even with the defense stuff, because they do have the the charging station related stuff. They have Wejo for anything that's future. So if you really look at like good ESG investors will see Palantir as a more holistic sort of ESG buy, I would say. But yeah, you're totally on point with that.
Yeah, and also this Russia thing should probably help on that front too, because now people realize that, hey, listen, Western democracy really is at threat. Like all the stuff that we say about China and Russia is not just some talking points on a slideshow. It's actually real things that we have to contend with, and all these companies should be looking at ways to decouple themselves away from the Chinese supply chain and also from some of the and protect themselves even from like right now my company is on a complete data protection mode. Like we have gone into another level of cybersecurity, and let me tell you, operationally it sucks because there's so many additional protocols that we have to take where we have like right now I hate, my God, like I understand the purpose of a dual factor authentication, but if I told you like some of the passwords that I have and the password complexities that they want, I'm like, come on, man. Like I spent you won't believe like how many days a week. I would say at least once or twice a month. I usually have to call our enterprise service desk to reset my my administrative password to all my application servers, because right now I've got access to all the application servers. And the thing is, like, they're like, oh, and they give you like a whole list of things that you can't do, you can't use, but I feel like, and I spoke to one of our CIOs. I was like, listen, man, like, because you're making this so complicated, people are just writing their passwords down in places. Don't do that. We got to come up with a better way, man. So, this dual factor authentication, it's okay now. I like it. Like it takes some getting used to, because then you have to like make sure that your phone is like within, like sometimes I'll be like sitting in my underwear in my office. I'm like, all right, let me do something. Like, damn it, where's my phone? I got to go authenticate real quick. And if I don't authenticate within a certain period of time, it'll like lock me out. And I'm like, damn it, now I got to call someone. But guess what? If these people get into our application servers and our database stuff, dude, they could wreak havoc. So I totally understand what the reasoning for it.
That's such an unbelievable call out that actually speaks to the hidden danger that we don't have to see. Like the inconvenience of 2FA feels like, and I feel the same way. If my phone's dead, I'm like, oh, I can't work. I'm dead. I can't even turn my computer on. And so it speaks to the point of like, 2FA is because we are under attack at all times, whether it's hacking from internal or external or phishing or whatever else it is. There's someone trying to grab something at all times from you and from your peers, and whether it's nefarious or political or war focused or whatever it is, right? Good, bad, ugly, in between. It just speaks to the fact that like there is always someone trying to get to your data, and our version of aggravation is about clicking an extra button on our phone. And we're watching, to your point, both you guys, we're watching tanks rolling down Main Street of a country right now. And tying back to like, if you're not aware of where they are, can you really defend yourself? But yeah, well said. I mean, inconveniences range from a click of a cell phone to a tank rolling down Main Street, right?
So what we'll do now, like, let me actually, it's fun. Okay, I'll add to that real quick. I have a cybersecurity story which you guys are going to find interesting, but just about the whole tanks rolling down Main Street thing. Like, I don't want to get into the whole Ukraine and Russia thing. I mean, I don't know anything about it. I understand that Russia's aggressor and stuff, but I just want to bring up the fact that there was that one guy. I don't know if you guys heard of him. That he became like an ace overnight. He shot down like 6 Russian aircrafts. It's just,
I don't know if that's 100% proven yet. I mean, trust me, I want it to be true, but I don't know if it's true.
I'm telling you, like, these guys are really putting on a fight, and it sucks that we are living in a time where this kind of stuff is happening. So it's important to be cognizant of that. So my thoughts and prayers, and I'm sure all of us goes to them. So just because you brought that up, I want to bring that up.
No, I agree. I feel ignorant that I don't know more, frankly.
No, me too. It's like I want to know more, and the more we look, it's like I guess we need to find out what kind of stuff is happening and what media is good and bad and that kind of stuff. But
what I found to be really
security.
Sorry, Kris. No, I was going to say, what I found to be really interesting. Everyone was worried about Russian hackers hacking into the U.S., but they didn't realize Anonymous was going to hack them. So Russia shouldn't be focusing on offensive capabilities. They should be focusing on defensive capabilities, because they just showed you how many gaps that the Russian services have on their side. They've been developing, a lot of these countries, they develop these offensive capabilities, but they don't realize that, dude, the U.S. has an arm of offensive hackers as well. I mean, I'm not saying Anonymous is U.S. hackers, but I'm saying the NSA, I used to be at Fort Meade. Trust me, they hire the best and most talented people. The NSA has a tremendous amount of power over them. Like the other really big players in cybersecurity that really doesn't get spoken about is the Israelis. I'm talking about Israelis with their Stuxnet virus on what they did to Iran. Dude, there are case studies right now of like things that the Israelis are able to do. I mean, trust me right now, the Israelis are probably like right underneath like the NSA. I don't know. I don't think they're number 100%, but then again, I don't know. I mean, these guys are like black hats waiting in the background,
And this is why, to your point about 2FA, we've literally reintroduced physical authentication, because that's the best we can come up with in 2022 to say, like, I can't let this be all computer based. I have to physically touch a button somewhere,
Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah. Even for me, like, I think the one story I have about the MFA thing is I got hired at this place, and sorry, I'm coughing, but I got hired at this place, and there was this guy that had to onboard me. He was like a junior. I made a big fucking mistake, man. I was like, you know what? This guy's really cool. He helped me a lot. Dude, every time I got hired anywhere, nobody gives a shit. So no one helped me at all. So I'm like, this guy helped me. So I'm gonna help him out a little bit. So I talked to my manager. I'm like, you know what? Get this guy on my team. I think he knows what he's doing. He knows the system and stuff, right? And I was like, you know what? You learn. So we set up basically a cluster of like virtual machines. And I was like, here's what you set up here. Here's the network policies, all the stuff that you need to do. So I gave it to him, and I was like, you sure you can do this? Because I really want you to learn and get ahead. And I'm like, I felt good. I'm like, hey man, I'm finally helping somebody. No one's helping me. This is great, right? I felt like I was like this like father figure and all this stupid shit. Turns out like he got a little hasty and he left a bunch of stuff, and it's my fault. I took full responsibility for it, but we had this attack where these guys came in and they were literally just stacking servers. We had like a bill of $40,000 that month, and I was sitting there. I'm like, crap, man, I'm definitely gonna get fired for this. I didn't, but it was one of those things where it's like, you misunderstand such. And you know what it was? It was basically, Sean, you familiar with Jenkins?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. So you know how like when you do Jenkins, when you load Jenkins, there's that basically when you load it, you're supposed to turn off the proxy feature where it doesn't like read your logs everywhere. Right. So he didn't do that. And it was like one of those simple things that you have to do. Right. So I'm like, fuck, it's like one simple thing. Right. And it's on me, but it's such a simple thing, guys. Like, for those of you who don't understand, small things can cause large problems. And in this case, it definitely did. And the worst part about it, and this is one of the reasons why Palantir might really work out in the long run, right? Is that finding the problem, and we found it. It took us at least like half a day to find it. And it was such a small issue, but finding it is a mess because when you're using all these products, you're expecting it to work, and half of the time you're going through logs, which are literally verbose, like letters and numbers on black, black like background, unless you're like somebody who uses light mode and you're a psycho, but whatever. but yeah, you're looking through like sifting through crazy logs to find a needle in a stack of freaking needles. So that's why if you need something like like cybersecurity, it's an understatement. You definitely need it. You have to have it. So, it's funny stories, but at the end of the day, I think we're getting to a point where these things are just going to start becoming more ubiquitous. And honestly, we should have talked, I guess, Web3 and stuff like that, but I think we'll cut it off soon. We'll do some closing thoughts now, just because I want to put like bite-sized stuff for a podcast. But Sean, dude, we would love to have you on, just because I think all of us talk a lot. So it's probably good to chalk it up into different things. We'll definitely do Web3 and stuff moving forward, guys. So,
dude, Sean, you need to talk to Coach Trap. I need to see this happen, dude. The Coach Trap and you together, you guys will just feed off of each other. We got to make that happen.
First of all, guys, I will talk all day. You tell me you get 24-hour time, I'm ready to rock and roll on that. I love it. And like, I think to your point too, like, I think people are learning now more than ever, and thankfully because of investing, that this is an insanely interesting world. What sounds boring, like things like, oh, it's code or a data lake versus a warehouse, which was a great question. When you start to dig into this and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, like my financial future is tied to understanding this. This isn't just about getting a job. This is about asymmetrical returns in my portfolio, because I understood why one company has a 2% advantage over another, but that 2% will be 100% of my portfolio. And there's a lot to be talked about here at scale. And yeah, my God, I love this, guys. This is awesome.
Yeah, I think that's the one good thing about that's one thing I really appreciate about this community, which is there's a lot of folks that are just general retail, and obviously we all appreciate you guys, and a lot of you in the community like that. But there are some of us that, I'm not saying it's us or anything, but there are a lot of really highly, people with a lot of experience and stuff that are holding this stock, and there's a reason for that, right? There's only some companies where people really like holding that stock for a reason, and I think Palantir is one of those companies that has that kind of community as well. I mean, Sean's definitely one of those people. You don't have to say it yourself, man, but you definitely bring a wealth of knowledge, and we all really appreciate it. But
I appreciate it.
That being said, we'll go to closing thoughts if you guys don't mind, Kris.
Palantir to me is the future, right? I think at least it's going to play a large part of what's going to happen in the future. I think we're very early in the game right now. I know a lot of people think this is an old company, but dude, they've been developing a product that only recently has been put out there. And now they're actually backing it with a lot more salespeople, right? One of the things that I've always been a little bit leery of Palantir is trying to understand how you can sell software without a good sales team. Because I've worked in adopting and implementing software, and I can tell you, sales is your number one area where if you have weakness, no matter how good your product is, it'll never walk in the door. The other thing that I also feel is very, very strongly about is that there has to be that personal one-to-one connection that I wish. I think Palantir they went public at a good time, but it could have been better with regards to COVID not being around. Because I think even software sales, even though it's something that you could present on a Zoom call, you still need that personal touch, especially if it's a product that's a multi-million-dollar product. I find it very hard to complete a sale over a Zoom call, right? And then just paperwork just coming, and then people, you need to have that interaction, especially with the executive folk. So I think right now Palantir is gearing up for a dramatic sales cycle. I think hopefully over the next 2 years, that'll pay off, and we see that commercial revenue growth just accelerate. I know it's already growing like crazy according to the last quarter, but that number can accelerate even further, right? One thing I do want to take back, and I think I was a little bit wrong on another podcast that I did a little while back.
Is it the stapler comment?
Second?
Is it the stapler?
No, not the stapler comment. I live by the stapler comment. Screw that. I'm not going. I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong about that. No, I'm gonna keep my stapler theory going. No, it was about like Palantir separating itself from the government. I did a lot more research over the last couple of weeks, and I think Palantir fundamentally needs a government portion in their company, because there's a lot of things fundamentally that they're still left to be learned from the government side that can translate over and be ported into the commercial side. And by separating the company out, it may not necessarily work out the same way, where you get that ability to like be involved in newer things. The government, is always the one thing I don't like about the government is the procurement process and difficulty and the bureaucracy related to the sales portion of it, which is why it upsets me sometimes. Like companies that rely on government revenue tend to have this lumpiness, but that doesn't take away from the technology getting better. So I would take that back and say, no, Palantir probably needs the government side to help them hone their skills, so that whatever commercial product that they do end up, commercializing further will end up being a really good one. So
yeah, so I'll jump in.
Yeah.
I think what we have to do is separate this into two conversations. There's a company and there's a stock. Right. I love what you just said about lifelong technical sales here, right? Like the conversations, the deals get done aren't the 90-minute meeting. They're the 3-minute conversation in the hallway. And you're right. It's very hard to do that in a way where someone will say on the way out, like, hey, I really like that. You should talk to so-and-so. That happens a lot, more than most people would think who don't work in that world. As a company, they're doing awesome things. I think for sure they do not want to separate government out, but would you have to build a brick wall? And I hope to hear that they're doing that. We want to make sure that they are completely engaged on both, but those are two separate teams, as if they don't exist to each other. That's what I'm looking to hear long term. As a company, they're doing the right things. They're building the commercial business. They're thinking about new SKUs, new go-to-markets, new use cases. They're doing a better job than ever on their investor decks as far as like how they're presenting where and how they're working across different platforms and products.
Yeah, true.
So the company's doing a good job. I think they'll get where they need to be on the hiring process. I think a lot of people would be very excited to go there. On the stock side, look, I'm long and I want to be, but I'm going to speak as if I'm not for a second. I think that if you're an investor and you're not sure what to do here, it's okay to feel unsure. And due diligence is tough if you're new to it. So I think what you have to do is really take a step back and realize, like, am I so far in the water I need to exit my position or do something different? Should I think about ways to play against this? Do I leverage options to get scale? How do I protect myself? I think the reality is that you can be long Palantir and you can also be long another AA company and another. And it's okay to diversify and know that you're covering your rear end from an investment perspective into multiple winners in the sector. And I'm going to take, I promise 30 more seconds. I really will talk all day. I mean that. There's this, the idea of survivorship basis is so heavy in the stock market and no one thinks about it. When we run analysis on holdings, you know what doesn't get analyzed? The companies don't exist anymore. Those that were taken public or acquired, right? So when we run our analysis on companies, it's like, wow, everything's amazing. It's like, well, that's only because you don't see the losers. They're not listed anymore. You pick 2 out of 3 that go to 0. It doesn't matter if you double up on that one. So it's just really important that when you're doing your research, you understand who the competitors are and who they were, who they've beaten and who they haven't. And, I think for sure this is a conversation maybe the 3 of us can even add some more folks in as well when the time is right and really go deep into like how we do due diligence, et cetera, on this, because I go real deep and I have my own metrics that I create my own caveats on and stuff like that. So anyways, really glad to be here, guys. I just want to say as a general comment to everyone out there, like, be careful, make sure you know how to hedge if you're in huge positions that could change your life if they go against you. That's really what I'd say.
Yeah, 100%. And just real closing thoughts, guys. I think these 2 gentlemen really describe most of the best stuff. But really, my take on Palantir is I'm looking at it from a technology perspective. I will always on my channel for like 99.9% talk about just the company. I do not talk about the stock price. And this is really why, because I treat the stock and the company, like Sean was talking about, as two different entities. And a lot of times, guys, we have to be cognizant of what we're investing in, right? Like a lot of people are coming here from the Tesla side of it, as am I, right? Like I knew about it before, but I was waiting for the DPO and all that. But at the end of the day, this is not Tesla. Like there's very different, opportunities here. It's a different sort of scope altogether, different company, different leadership. A lot of things are a lot different. So it's very important. Like this is your money, right? So just again, to touch on what Sean was talking about, it's your money. So it's very important that you do your due diligence. This could be part of your due diligence, like listening to people like us, that's fine. But at the end of the day, you have to understand that what you're technically investing in is the company. You're just using the stock as a proxy, and the stock, like anyone else, could have multiple different things pulling it up and down. And you have to be ready for that, especially now. Like we're literally during wartime right now, so I can't lecture you on the stuff. I mean, I'm pretty much read them on 2 accounts for Palantir, and on the third account, I bought a large amount actually at DPL. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why I'm not that pissed that Kathy sold it. I bought it before she did, so it's fine, whatever. Like she's not like God, right? So it is what it is. But at the end of the day, you have to understand what you're investing in. Like I only invest in maybe like through 2 or 3, maybe 4 different things. And that's because I do 6, 7, 8, 9, sometimes up to a year worth of research to do that. And the reason I do that is because I got burned before, guys. It's not like I'm some expert investor or nothing like that. It's just that I want a particular multiple on what I invest in. And it's very important that you understand and do your research on what's right for you and your family as well. Like understand the importance of what you're doing. So like Sean's talking about, I wouldn't suggest YOLOing or doing anything. Not that any of this is investment advice. But at the end of the day, we like to talk about the company because that's really something that a lot of us, all 3 of us, definitely can speak on. And we'll hopefully continue to do that, Sean, dude. Like it was honestly awesome to have you, man. But I think we gotta do multiple sessions like this because we like tons of.
There's just so much to decode. There's so much.
It's too much. It's too much. And to be honest, I would love to do this. I just want to cut it up into bite-sized pieces so that our audience can watch it after and actually like come back and talk to us and stuff like that, right? So I think that kind of format might be better. But
yeah, and give Sean a follow, by the way. He's on Twitter and on YouTube. I saw some really great content that came out of your channel, Sean. And I was like, I'm glad you did that interview with Amit, because after that I was like, man, like someone with so much deep knowledge and it's industry. For some reason, there are not too many people outside of you and Coach Trap and Cyberfam that have the developer knowledge and some of the more technical knowledge that can help translate between what's actually happening to retail. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's so many people craving this information and wanting more. So if you guys want more technical information and you want to really deep down, not into the stock, but into the company, then I would recommend you follow Sean and you follow Shabari. And if you want, you can follow me, Kris Patel 99.
Guys, our Twitter is down below. Feel free to follow us if you really value this information. At the end of the day, we're really just all 3 of us are investors. We're all shareholders, right? Just to put it out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we all hold Palantir, but we will, I guess, in our future one talk about different stuff. So stay tuned for that. But I think this is awesome, guys. I really appreciate all of you guys for coming on and commenting and doing all sorts of stuff and taking time on a weekend. I hate doing this on the weekends, but I really appreciate you guys spending the time with us, all 3 of us. So I will sign off with that for now, and we will catch all of you on the next one. Please make sure you follow these 2 gentlemen. These guys are excellent people in the community, and it is definitely going to benefit you for, we all talk about different things. So if you really want to gather all sorts of information, check out their Twitters, check out whoever's YouTube. I know Kris and Sean both have YouTube channels as well. So feel free to do that. Until the next time, I'll catch you guys later. Peace.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.